Hello, welcome everyone back to the Label Paranormal Podcast. I'm your host, Tom.
And I'm Mark.
And we're here with another delightful episode of Label Paranormal. We're joined by a special guest, Nicole Rae. And we're going to be talking with her, and we're going to be doing a case study this time, a little different than what we usually have done. So we're going to take a deep dive into the Phoenix Lights, the phenomenon of 1997 that has spurned many controversial opinions, attitudes, publicity stunts, you name it. It has the gambit. We all are fascinated about lights in the sky over cities, right? So this one just pops to the top of the list. We have some pictures, video to show, all kinds of good stuff. So you're in for a treat. But first and foremost, we have a guest. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being on Labeled Paranormal. And let's introduce you to our viewers. So why don't you talk a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what got you into the paranormal?
Yes, it's always a hard part talking about myself, but
Right.
Thank you for having me here. And as you know, I'm also a medium and a psychic seer. I can remote you, but I'm also part of the Roy Legacy Foundation. I'm about here now, and actually, I'm also an author. I keep forgetting to promote myself. I can't believe I wrote I just put out my last one, so that's 15 books now.
Wow! Congrats.
That's all right. Thank you. And it's about my true UFO encounters and paranormal experiences, which I've had many experiences. And sometimes I manage to capture a video. Sometimes you can't, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I had met Nicole, I guess, on accident. I was doing a podcast. They were also streaming live. So it wasn't, a typical recording mark like this. She, I guess, resonated with some of the things I said, felt like commenting on the side there. And then she had a lot of good points. So it was, you kind of knew it wasn't just a guest. It was somebody who is one of us. You know what I mean, Mark? So
Yeah.
somebody who is one of us. So naturally, see, normal people, I'm going to put it this way, normal people slide into DMs to hook up, but podcasters slide in for episodes, right? So, Nicole, I messaged her, and I was watching a little bit of her podcast too, which you also go live, Nicole, with yours, correct? Okay, yes, great. And you had yeah, true. So with some of her episodes, I one in particular, she had somebody from the Betty and Barney Hill, there's a paranormal society, right? And I thought that was fascinating, and she was asking a lot of really good questions of that, because if you have your name attached to Betty and Barney Hill, you have to know your stuff, right? I mean, those are the grandparents of modern, paranormal investigations. So I just, hats off to you, and congratulations on the books and everything. Mark and I right now have a combined of 0, so you have a little bit of a head start there. We'll change that though. I'm sure we'll change that.
Maybe.
Maybe. So again, thank you so much for joining. And I'm going to kick things off here by just, I'll read the brief overview, just a typical, our, sort of wiki of it, and then we'll kick off some of the topics there. So I'm going to go ahead here and read. So the Phoenix Lights on the night of March 13th, 1997, Phoenix resident Michael Kurstin, I believe, Krzyston. If I said that wrong, Michael, get in touch and I'll edit it. Shot amateur video of lights flying over his home in a V formation. He said, "Before I knew it, there was an entire display of lights that came on. I got a little excited at the time. I called my wife. It was really quite unusual." So Michael was not the only eyewitness that evening. Thousands of Arizona residents claimed to have seen the exact same formation of lights. Were the lights UFOs? Many of the eyewitnesses were immediately convinced. Not surprisingly, an official explanation soon emerged from Captain Drew Sullins of the Air National Guard. The 104th Fighter Squadron of the Maryland Air National Guard's 175th Wing was conducting a night training exercise in the vicinity of the mysterious lights, where they were dropping night illumination flares over the North Tactical Ridge at Luke Air Force. And a lot of people seem to think that those flares could, in fact, have been the quote unquote mystery lights. It seems plausible that the flares would be the cause for sightings. However, there was a problem with the military's explanation. The military said the flares were dropped at between 9 and 10 p.m. However, the most impressive sightings occurred between 8 and 9 p.m. Taken together, these eyewitness accounts seem to indicate that there was something other than flares in the Phoenix night sky. At 8:10 p.m., nearly an hour before the military began dropping flares, Ross Nickel and his family were driving on Highway 89 when they spotted the lights overhead. I saw some lights in a very small pattern, and what they really looked like at the point were just dim stars, several of them just in a tight pattern. They were white-like stars, and they were coming towards us. At that point, they changed colors and went from white to red. They were just overhead at that point, and they were, in my estimation, not very high off the ground. I'm guessing 1,000 feet. And there was absolutely no sound during the whole time, from start to finish. There was absolutely no sound. 20 minutes later, a commercial airline pilot and his wife were driving home after dinner when they too spotted the lights. For professional reasons, the pilot agreed to tell his story only if the identity was concealed. I've been flying for 29 years now, and I'm not used to looking up in the sky and not being able to figure out what I'm seeing. I looked at it and then tried to make it into an airliner. I realized again it's going too slow, and there's no noise at all. And then the next thing that struck me is that, man, why would his landing lights be pointed straight down? Given the location of the sightings, the lights appeared to be heading south. At 8:30 p.m., Ozma Linderman and her boyfriend were sitting down for dinner when they had their own encounter. It was very clear in my mind that it was one solid craft. The lights were traveling too perfectly spaced apart, and there was a void clearly between the lines that blacked out the stars when it came down. The whole thing just slowed. I don't know, maybe to stop, or it hovered for a second, and then what looked like one solid red oval object. It just turned red and shot straight up, disappeared, gone, completely gone. At 8:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the military began dropping flares, trucker Gary Morris spotted the lights while driving. To me, it didn't look like floodlights. They didn't really look like spotlights. There was something different about them, and something that I've never seen before. Between 8 and 9 p.m., the Phoenix lights traveled over 300 miles and were seen by hundreds of witnesses. An hour passed. Then, at 10 p.m., Michael Kirsten shot the video that would provide the basis for the military's official explanation. If you lived in Phoenix, these flares, some of them dropped at 15,000 feet. They burn very bright. They burn for 5 to 6 minutes. They are suspended by a parachute, and it's a very large flare. You would be able to see those flares, I would imagine, 150, maybe even 200 miles. The commercial pilot is convinced the lights he saw were not flares. I've seen them from the ground. I've seen them from the air, and these were not flares. And probably the major reason that were almost certainly not flares dropped by the military was they're dangerous. Why would they ever be dropped over a population center? So,
Yeah.
So first, that is absolutely insane, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead here and share really quick these images of the Phoenix lights.
Yeah, approximately 20,000 people allegedly were witness to the Phoenix Lights, which makes it one of the largest, if not the largest, UFO mass sighting in history. And it's just fascinating because, you know, if it were flares, those would be the reports that you'd be getting. Why the hell are they dropping big ass flares on our city? But that's not what was reported at all. What was reported was a very large V-shaped structure from almost every eyewitness. None of the eyewitnesses were complaining about flares. If they were flares, and not only that, if they were flares at night, all of the lights from the flares would be reflecting all of the smoke burning off of them. You would see the smoke very, very clearly.
They would. Yeah. The time doesn't make sense, first off.
Yeah.
Anybody can see that. Anybody can see that the time doesn't match up. There's a hierarchy, Mark, and I know we've talked about this before, but there's a hierarchy to. There she is. She's back.
Yeah.
So there's a hierarchy to people that have sightings, right? A pilot, to me, is up there. A military official is up there. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I don't mean to discriminate against anybody's job or anything like that. But if a pilot's telling you that's not a flare, I don't know. I'm more likely to believe that, right?
Mm-hmm. But here's the deal. What about a pilot who is a professional actor who's played a military official in movies before, telling you directly that these are not flares? Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell witnessed these Phoenix lights. He was flying his plane, looking at the radar, looking in the sky, reporting to air traffic control what he was seeing in the sky. And it's very clear they were not flares. This is an object. This is an object with, I believe, 5 or 6 lights on it. I'm not really sure how the formation was, but it's very clear. And that's what Kurt Russell says as well. It's kind of crazy to think about that, though.
Absolutely. I saw, just in the last picture I just checked, I saw 7, but I think I saw 6 before too.
Yeah.
So, Nicole, let me ask you. Some people, if the military is saying these are flares, that means it would be 6 or 7 independent objects, right? But most of the reports are people saying this is one large object. Where do you fall on that debate? Yeah. Yep. So go ahead.
Oh, were you going to say something, Nicole?
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. If you're with us, please speak up at any time, and we can, go in from there. But I would think this is one object, right? I think it's one object. I don't think it's several flares. They are two. Yes, exactly. I mean, they're spaced too perfectly. Mm-hmm. You have wind, you have wind, you have gusts, you have different material, you have parachutes. You're telling me all of these things opened up at the exact same time, the exact same way, to keep a shape.
Well, it wouldn't be hard to believe to get them information first initially, but then after a couple of minutes, they're gonna be wobbling all over the place. They're not gonna hold for me. Like, they might slowly descend, but it's not gonna look like a perfect V shape after 2 or 3 minutes. You know what I mean? It's just not. Absolutely. And so before this, I watched James Fox's I Know What I Saw documentary. I think it's one of the best UFO documentaries out there. I think it's from like 2009 or 7 or something like that. It's one of his first documentaries, and he knocks it out of the fucking park with it. He has a bunch of footage, like raw footage from the Phoenix Lights. It mostly focuses on the Phoenix Lights and really kind of legitimizes the entire scenario, what happened, and not just the event, but the fallout, what happened with it. But when he was going around getting interviews from these people, the way that they were describing this, all of them, number one, there's no contention. None of them thought it was flares. I mean, maybe they thought it was flares initially, but then they really looked at it and it looked like a solid object. But the way that they described this object is that it was either a football field or a couple football fields long. Yeah. And not only that, but some of them described it as when they would look up at it, when they were directly underneath it. Well, some people thought it was going to crash on them, but others actually saw a mirage effect. They saw a mirage effect on it, and this is actually common in some UFO sightings, where you have this weird mirage effect around the object. And not just that, but something that struck out to me personally was some people would describe the lights for people who are close and really close to see them. They would describe the lights as these sort of these circular, almost like orange plasma. Like they weren't. It was very strange what they actually were, and this thing was slowly hovering across the city. Another witness said that the object, she saw the object come in over the ridge of a mountain, and the object was as wide as the two mountains on either side of the ridge. So I mean, that's just fucking immense. You know what I mean? What do you think about that, Tom and Nicole?
What was that,
and
Nicole?
No sound.
Yeah, and no sound. You're exactly right. That seems to be, yeah, it seems to be standard across the board when you come to any type of UAP or UFO phenomenon in the sky, is the lack of sound. Now, anything you have here, motored or not, vehicle, bicycle, scooter, they make sounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. So this is a propelled thing in the sky, hovering, which not many aircraft can do, to be honest with you, but hovering over the, how can you explain the lack of sound? It's impossible. We don't have any known vacuums, right? We don't have any anything to deter the sound in the sky at that rate. So the fact that we keep coming back to the sound issue and they can't explain it other than a flare, if that's the case, and this thing really was a flare, show me who got fired for dropping it over a city with 4 or 5 million people back then, living in it. What was the reasoning to do that?
Well, not just that, but the fact of the matter is, the response to this event initially was, well, number one, the public was freaked out. So they all started calling the police, calling the air traffic control, seeing what was going on, and by the next day, the commotion around this event had hit a fever pitch to the point where the mayor had to make a statement, and the Air Force was forced to come out with some sort of reason. So the some sort of reason they came up with was 2 hours later they were dropping flares. 2 hours later after the event that they were dropping flares. That was the thing that they came up with. And it's just very clear bullshit, because they only came out with the response until they were forced to come out with a response. If it was legitimately what they say it was, they would have been like, "Oh yeah, that's exactly what it is." There wouldn't have been like, "Okay, so Tom, you live in like Westchester, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. If you saw crazy lights happening over Westchester and all your neighbors did, and you called the police, and the police were like, "Oh yeah, we contacted the Air Force. They're doing training exercises," then you'd be like, "Oh, okay, well, then no worries. No need to go to a national newspaper, but no need to contact my neighbor. No need for everybody to get together and force the mayor to make a statement about what the fuck happened in the sky last night." You know what I mean? If the Air Force immediately just came out and said it, you know what I mean? But they didn't.
They didn't. And they weren't going to.
And they kept dancing around it. It's always a dance with them.
Were you going to say something, Nicole?
Right. Exactly.
Very well. Yeah. With that also, Mark, to your point, let's say it's happening now, right? Outside Westchester, suburb Philadelphia, there's something going on in the sky. I will admit we have a little more technology now where I can go to like a radar and sky
Right.
scanner and see, what is there. Keep in mind, right, that people did this. Now, I don't know how reliable it can be, but people contacted Sky Harbor, which is the airport in Phoenix, and said their radar picked up nothing.
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 Yeah.
Now, radar has to work at a certain altitude. Could both things be right? Yes. But whereas now, if I'm looking on Skyscanner and there's lights going on and I see absolutely no aircraft in there, yeah, now I am going to start to make put lives out on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is to be like, what the hell's up there?
Yeah.
I understand people didn't have it before, but where they didn't have that is these people had a prime location. We've all seen these videos, right? We've all seen these pictures. They're looking at like a side of a mountain in the valley, and they're looking like pretty. I don't want to say eye level, but they're pretty close to it. They're pretty high up.
Yeah.
So they had a phenomenal view, an absolutely phenomenal view of this. And one thing we have to realize is, we're seeing it through a VHS recording device in 1997. What it looked like to them isn't the balls of light we saw we see in these pictures. It's not the balls of light we see in the videos. They saw real life, and you can hear in their voices they don't know what they're seeing. Now you're telling me if a flare got dropped, okay, let's say it is. Let's push everything to the side and say that yes, this was a flare. Don't you have different luminosities? Don't you have a different? Won't you see it brighter than dimmer? Right? Wouldn't you see it up higher, come down?
Yes.
And not go.
It would be flickering. It would be flickering rapidly.
Yeah. Sure. Go ahead. I saw 7 lights in the. What was that? Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure, how many would come out there, but in this picture, it's 7. But I would agree, I would think there's 7 different luminosities. Okay, let's say they all kicked on, Mark, at the exact same time. Then you're having a shade of 7 getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer.
Yeah, they would just get dimmer.
Yeah, nothing that I saw suggested that.
No, the flare theory, there's so many holes in it. The fact of the matter is, okay, so you have these big industrial military grade flares, 30,000 luminosity with little parachutes on them to keep them relatively in the same spot. Okay, you're still talking about they're going to move dramatically around. Even if they're not falling slowly, they're still going to move dramatically around. They're still going to produce an immense amount of smoke because the brighter the flare, the more smoke there's going to be, and it's going to light that all up at night. The flame is going to be flickering. We don't see any of that here. We don't see this is a perfect V shape, of just solid bright lights. And to your point with the radar before, that was a really good point that you made there, that it only works at certain altitudes. But the fact of the matter is that they witnessed this craft flying over the ridge of the mountain. This thing was only about 1,000, maybe 1,500 feet up, probably more around 1,000 feet above the city. That's fucking close. Any radar is going to pick that up. That's
right.
That's like the point of radar, is to pick up stuff that's that close. You know what I mean? So, I mean, if the radar can't see that, there's something going on. And I think the real question here is, it's obviously not flares, so it could be a top secret military exercise. Now, that could easily be the case, but they could have just said it was a train. Whenever there's a top secret military exercise where it's like that, the military, you ask them about it, they will come out and at least say, yes, there was a training exercise here. They didn't even bother saying there was they said with the flares, but that was 2 hours after the actual event happened, So my stance on this is, well, what do you guys think? Do you guys think this is a secret military project, or do you think it's extraterrestrial, or just who know what do you like, Russia, China? What do you think it is? See, I've seen examples of what it could be with these big V-shaped weather balloons that don't make any sense. They're not. That doesn't line up with what it is. Just looks similar. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Nicole. I'll let you go first.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Excellent. So I I do too, but I believe it's extraterrestrial as well. And here's where I'm going to prove a little more evidence to this. I'm going to go ahead and share.
I have a different theory, by the way, than
Okay.
extraterrestrial.
All right.
If you want to hear that first.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I actually do not think that this one in particular is extraterrestrial. I think this lines up with the timeline of Lockheed developing first in the mid 80s the T3RB Aurora, and this V-shaped craft is a much larger final sort of test vehicle, sort of like some sort of carrier craft that they have parked out in space now. I think and the reason why I think that is because at this point I have heard at least 2, maybe 3 stories from ex-military about them going out to a training range and in the middle of the day and seeing one of these craft hanging in the sky. And I forget the story. I'd have to find it again. But these craft apparently have been seen at Vandenberg Air Force Base, and we interact with it. That's my personal opinion, but
Sure.
Go for it, man. Go for whatever you got.
Yeah. So, not to just to bounce that back with you. Coming, both things can be true. Where they've seen this craft does exist later, but it's not this now.
Right.
Both things can be true in that regard. How, despite it being, a propelled flying machine, does that specific one have hovering capabilities? Can that fly sturdily at 1,000 feet or just above a city horizon, just over a mountain? Does that, what would be the need for a military craft to have lights aiming straight at the ground? You know what I mean? Rather than ahead of it. Why do you not care what's ahead of you when you're only focusing your beams below you?
I don't think they're just lights. I think that's part of the propulsion system.
Oh, I see. So you're saying that means lift, propulsion. That gains lift through whatever mechanism is those lights, and that's true. And that's a good point, because I don't want to just say all lights are lights. I don't want to say that, because you could look at the end of a regular F-16, and when it kicks on, if it kicked on at night, you would see light, but really that's that is its propulsion.
Yeah.
Not all lights are just lights.
Yeah.
Light in that way is very human made. I don't know how other civilizations would approach light. We need to put a lot of energy into making a light bulb, right? So, no pun intended. But I don't know if we would be able to experience light in that way. What I'm saying is, let me back that up. In 3D, we cannot understand what a tesseract is.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we? All we're doing is we would put that object into something we can understand. This light could just be the same way, putting it into something we understand, because we can't wrap our heads around a 4D object, 4D light. You can call time the fourth dimension. Well, until we figure that out, it's just an idea. So, if you have a sphere going towards a piece of paper, all it's seeing is a circle getting bigger, right? And then as it passes through, it's going to get smaller, right?
Yeah.
Our 5 senses are just instincts that we've developed to not get us killed throughout evolution, right?
That's very
So,
true.
so how many senses that don't affect that are we missing? So anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's Tom on a soapbox, giving theory speeches. But
That's a little metaphysicsy.
why not? We can always
We can get into it.
Everything. So with that being said, the no noise, the low spacecraft, the immediate military response, and the no radar sighting. To me, I'm going to label that as an unidentified flying object, and maybe it's a cop out by definition. It is.
It's a total unknown.
Yeah. Phenomenon. It would be an unidentified flying object. I do think it's an object. I don't think it's objects. I don't think it's flyers. I think it's one craft, whether made by us.
So this is a good distinction between UAP and UFO. This is specifically a UFO, not a UAP.
UAP. Oh wait, let me see. Some UAPs can be UFOs, but not all UFOs can be UAPs.
There you go.
That's what I'm trying to say. And
that's the line.
Sorry, what was that, Nicole? Go ahead, Nicole, one more time. I didn't hear you. Yeah. So, yeah, you prefer UFO? I prefer UFO too.
Yeah, I prefer UFO too.
It's a good catch-all.
Yeah.
Until they come up with the next thing, right?
Yeah.
The next name for it. So, one thing that I wanted to bring up too, as we go forward with this, is that the Phoenix mayor at the time ended up becoming governor, and he has a wild name. His name's Fife. So Governor Fife Symington.
That's gotta be a nickname.
It has to be a nickname. Fife.
Yeah. Fife? Who names their kid Fife? All right, continue.
But we have old Fife, who I briefly shared the screen and showed him with one of his lieutenants in an alien costume. Completely reverse track and said, "I do believe it's a UFO."
Yeah.
Why?
And he says he saw it.
He says he saw it.
Yeah.
He actually, said he had to trot out that line.
Right.
Now, I don't blame him for that. He's a mayor. He's not a governor.
Yeah.
Albeit a big city, but he is a mayor. He's trying to win re-election. I mean, he has aspirations to go to governor, right? If your governor moved down, it's a different story. He wants to further his political career. I don't blame him for trotting the line.
Especially in that time, it's 1997. UFOs are incredibly fringe at this point. Any kind of addressing them legitimately, you were immediately labeled as a crackpot. You couldn't have a Tim Burchett back then, or some of the politicians that try to champion the UFO cause, because back then there was it was political suicide. And I honestly, I don't blame him at the time either, because he was probably not that familiar with the subject at all, and he just probably wanted to lower the temperature, calm everyone down. But the thing about it is, in 2002, I think it was 2001, which is crazy to think about. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch all this, but Fife Symington hosted the national press conference that had over 50, military officials, government officials, all testifying, not before Congress, but, at a press conference. All of these things about UFOs and what the government knows about them and our interactions with them. And unfortunately, that whole event lost traction because it happened right before 9/11. And 9/11, as soon as 9/11 happened, then nobody cared about UFOs anymore. So, obviously, but th- it's just interesting because that press conference hosted by Fife Symington, it's so, I think it's time to revisit that and go back and watch the testimony from those officials. It's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You learn a lot about what's not being said when somebody talks. You know what I mean? And as you get older, you start to read between the lines, read what they're not saying versus what they are saying. And if you take that mindset into things happening in the past, you'll gain a new perspective because look, we were a lot younger at that time. You know what I mean? We didn't know everything we were hearing in that way that we would understand now.
Yeah.
So the fact that it made a ruckus, whereas back then, you're right, it is so fringe. That means to me, reading the tea or reading, checking the smoke out, you have to believe there was a ton of people blowing up 911, their local non-emergency, phone number, their emergency phone number, police, fire, ambulance, whatever they needed to call to say what's up in the sky, what are you doing, what is going on. People, believe it or not, affect change, and the more people that come out and want to know something, you're going to get an answer. So at not in 10 o'clock at night, the mayor, who's probably well tucked into bed asleep, right, gets pulled out to go give this emergency, message to everyone of this is what it is.
Well, I think that was in the morning, but yeah, I remember.
Okay.
Yeah,
we can affect change by opening your damn mouth and telling people, hey, something's not right out there. And the more of us there are, the harder it is to silence.
And that's the thing about it that gets me is that upwards of 20,000 people witnessed this event, specifically addressing it as a giant V-shaped craft moving slowly over the city. There. I mean, what other events in history are like that are just mistaken like that? You know what I mean? I guess.
Yeah.
I guess there could be some mass, gigantic, huge UFO hoax sightings that I'm unaware of, but it seems really far fetched. I don't know. It's weird to. It's like they're living in two different realities. The public obviously saw a clear structure, and the officialdom just doesn't want to even address it. And that's how a lot of these really good case studies are. Is that you look at the case, and there's all this circumstantial evidence that points in directions, and nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to address it or talk about it. They just want to brush it under the rug and be like,
Right.
oh, those are just flares. Forget about the subject.
I mean, I don't think they care whether we believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Their job is to put the message out.
Right.
Their job isn't to convince us this is what it is and whatever. That's it. You know what I mean? But what their job isn't is to let it fester and to let it sit out there and to let it grow followers. Even back then, you know what I mean? Followers were picked up by newspaper, by your local 6 o'clock news. You know what I mean? That's what were your followers, and they did what they had to do.
Yeah.
But no, this was really fun. So I want to thank Nicole. Thank you so much for being on. And before we go, why don't you tell everybody the name of your podcast and anything you would like to promote now? The time is yours. Go ahead. Absolutely. That's true. That's true. I took a remote viewing session from her, and I can give her very good credit. She was unbelievably accurate to my settings and my surroundings.
Wow.
So
That's awesome.
yeah, down to the shade of the window shade.
Wow, that's really incredible. That's something else. Yeah.
Yeah. That's for sure. You're a good follow on Facebook. You always post. She does have a lot of videos on her own feed. So um, excellent job there. I know she sent one to me, and keep them coming. Mark and I have a meetup podcast or a meetup group every Thursday, so you can either hop on with us and share your video,
Yeah.
or one of us, and we'll discuss it. MUFON's slacking right now with their taking down their library, so we need stuff to look at.
It's UFOs over PA on Meetup.
Yeah, we'll make sure to send it to you, and write me any links that you have for anybody, and I'll put them in the comment, or I'll put them in the description synopsis of this podcast as well. But again, thank you so much for your time. We love, you are our furthest away guest over in Southern California, and we're over here in the cold. So thank you, Nicole, and to everybody out there. Thank you for listening to Label Paranormal Podcast. You can find us on any of your podcasting sites or smart speaker. Say Alexa, play Label Paranormal. If you like us, please like us, comment, give us 5 stars. We really appreciate that. And until next time, everybody, keep being weird, and we'll talk to you later. All right, have a good one.
See you guys.